Kia ora, everyone. Welcome to the webinar with Dr. Peter Crowe. I'm Gerry Lynch. I'm the CEO of Govn365. And before we get into chatting with Peter, I thought I'd just give you a little bit info about Govn365. So it's an innovative software tool and process where we help boards and executive teams to understand their strengths and their risks, and then help them really focus on the things that will improve their organizational governance and improve performance. So aim to simplify governance. That's our aim. So today we're talking to Dr. Peter Crowe. Really pleased to have him on here. He's a man that travels around the world, so it's very hard to get hold of him. Peter Crowe's an independent board director, advisor, and educator. Really respected around the world for his expertise in corporate governance, strategy, and boardcraft in particular. He travels, as I say, a lot around the world advising boards, and this morning we're really talking to him around the insights around navigating conflict in the boardroom. So it's one that I know a lot of people have challenges with, and getting from conflict to consensus. So welcome, Peter.
Thanks very much, Gerry. It sounds as if I'm the guy with the frequent flyer card, and yes, I am. But it's delightful to be speaking with you. I'm in my home office. I'm in Tauranga. I'm in the New Zealand time zone at the moment. And thank you very much for the invitation to have this chat.
Great, excellent. So just getting started. I mean, one of the key roles in the board is the chair when it comes to consensus and conflict. Do you agree in terms of the role of the chair? So the boards are very. Are they different to normal teams for a start? And what makes the characteristics of a great chair?
Whoa, what a way to start. So are they different from normal teams? Yes, absolutely. And I'd go so far as to say that a board is unique in that directors, if it's a company, they're directors, and if it's a trust, they're trustees. But I'm just going to use the word board members or the word director on this discussion. So individuals come into the room and they have got information at their fingertips. They've read stuff, they talk, they listen, they ask questions, and potentially they contend, which is what we're going to talk about. But the decisions that leave the room are not from individuals. It's the board, that is all of them together collectively, that makes the decision. And that's what makes it unique. But because we come from different backgrounds and we have different points of view, we're humans with different experiences after all, we see things differently. And so the role of the chair is to convene. Whereas a management structure is a hierarchy, and ultimately one person makes the decision, the boss of. In a board context, there is no boss. The chair is the convener of the board, not the boss. And so some characteristics to help make that work well. First and foremost, the chair has to understand his or her role, and they has to understand what governance is, and what it is not, and so the role of the board in the organisation. And that might sound a little bit theoretical and mechanical. It is, but if that's not in place, the effectiveness of the chair, let alone the effectiveness of the board, will be rubbish. So that chair needs to be also well prepared, fully engaged. So papers, interaction with chief executive between meetings and with other directors between meetings as necessary. Calm, well balanced. If the temperature rises because we've got some emotion around, the calming influence of the chair becomes critical. Everybody is in the room because they've got some contribution to make, and the chair's job is to draw that out. Not everybody needs to speak on every issue, but on important issues, the chair's got to exercise a bit of wisdom and draw that out, involve the people, step towards decisions, call out poor behaviour if that's needed, sometimes privately, sometimes publicly. And critically, because the board doesn't run the organisation, management does, the respect and the relationship, and I talk about the intimacy of the relationship between the chair and the chief executive is also critical. So there are some characteristics of effectiveness around the role of the chair.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So you didn't explicitly mention conflict there. So what if we move on to conflict? What are the biggest challenges you see around conflict? And is it a I'm not sure whether conflict is a good word in terms of, people view conflict as negative, but it might not be in your views. So the biggest challenges around conflict, and then what tactics you recommend to manage it well.
So let's try and define the term for a start. I think you and I, as we were sort of preceding this conversation, probably got a view, but some of the listeners and attendees may have a different view. So I'll try and define. So there's two words in here. One is tension and one is conflict. Tension is that notion, like when you're holding both ends of a rubber band or an elastic band, that there's a steady state, but when you pull them apart, there's differing forces, but they can move and be literally elastic. Conflict is about taking a position stridently, arguing for it, and being reluctant to move from that position. And Andrew Kakabadze, Henley Business School, in his research from 2017, 2018, in that order, talks about tension being good and conflict being bad. So tension is about holding these competing perspectives in our head as directors and the chair holding them collectively in the room while we consider them and debate them from multiple perspectives. Conflict is about me coming into the room and saying, we're going to do it this way. And just holding that position and either bullying or enforcing or getting grumpy or whatever it is, and that's bad. So
that's more to tension being, so conflict more about ego than
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, or political ideology or something like this but your point that you've just touched in on, I think, is really important, that humans generally are uncomfortable with conflict, and some of us get a bit aggressive, some of us get a bit timid around it, but ultimately there's a strong human nature component. So the key I've found is in my roles as, I've been chairing boards off and on for 20 years. I've been I don't know how many tens of boards I've actually sat on as a director or a trustee, but also advised and assessed that the boards that seem to handle this discomfort, this conflict, if you will, well, are those that get ahead of the game. They set clear expectations and gain agreement to align behaviour around what's acceptable. A code of conduct is one mechanism to both record and clarify what's acceptable, what's not. And then annually, you ask all your directors to review it, and together we all sign it. And that way it's all out in the open so we can hold things to account. But in the end, conflict is a symptom of stridency. And when people hold strongly held views closely, the temperatures can rise. So that to your first question, the chair needs to be absolutely awake for what might be brewing, and have a big enough brain to hold it all so that they can manage it through. There's no one right way to handle this stuff. It's difficult, and it can be sometimes.
Yeah, and if you have let's say one or two people who are stuck in a particular area, and the rest of the board are aligned, how does the chair deal with that?
So a person well known to many of the callers on this webinar taught me something quite a while ago now. Sir Jim Bolger, well, he's not Sir, but he turned it down, but Jim Bolger, former Prime Minister. He talked about being the cup of tea time. So he had a technique which he shared with me and a couple of others that were in a small group together, where if he discerns in his role as chair the sort of situation you've described, oftentimes you'll look at his watch and he'll say, oh, must be a cup of tea time. And so he'll adjourn the formality of the meeting, and then he'll caucus the members during that informal time while they're standing up and having a cup of tea or coffee, and sort of chat with them and see what's going on and negotiate, caucus, that sort of thing. And then when the meeting reconvenes, often it's possible for him, and he's done it on many occasions, and I've tried it, doesn't always work. So thanks very much, cup of tea. Let's sit down now. Where were we? And you sort of summarize where we were. Now, it seems to me that we were heading to about here. Is everybody comfortable with that? And you get the nods around the room. Yeah, okay, fantastic. So minute secretary, can we record that as a decision and move on? And so it's about taking the heat out of it, because for some people, when the temperature is high and the focus is on, so we're in the room, sometimes we just need a pressure release valve. And so, that's one technique that's practical, meaningful, and he's described, I've used, and it seems to work. But ultimately, it's about providing space. On the really big decisions, don't just come to a board meeting with a great big capital project or a great big potentially contentious issue and expect the board to get up to speed, be comfortable, and decide in that meeting. On the big stuff, frame it up over multiple meetings. I've got one on at the moment where I'm advising a board and they've got a major capital project that they need to do. And in fact, it's associated with business continuity. So if they do this project, multi-million, it's probably 10% of their gross revenue would be the spend equivalent. If they do this, or they need to do this project to enable them to continue trading next year. So that's the significance of it. It was tabled in January by management. And management said, here's a one-page paper. We've got this issue coming up. This is how it ties to our strategy. And our drop dead decision is July. So on most board meetings from January to July, they've been talking about this and just incrementing. I've had the opportunity to sit in on those board meetings to sort of see it working. And it's been delightful. Had that come from January straight to July in the same meeting, there would have been blood on the floor. Mm. So this is about warming ourselves up and getting used to it. It all comes back to human nature.
Yeah, no, that's a couple of good techniques there. Coming on to psychological safety and trust in the boardroom. So what I think one of the things I've seen on teams is that actually to get people speaking out, you need a level of psychological safety. Mm-hmm. So where does this fit in terms of boards to ensure all directors and executives actually, just importantly, feel that they can speak up and offer competing views without feeling uncomfortable versus tension, I suppose.
Yeah. I've gone and introduced a new dichotomy for the call, so sorry about that.
Tension's good though. Yes. I like tension, so that's good.
Yeah. I'm fine with that as well. So PS, psychological safety, it's a big term, but and it's quite commonly used nowadays, and so we're becoming familiar with it. But ultimately, it's that environment. It's as simple as that environment, as you said, where the participants feel comfortable that they can say what they want to say and not get their head chopped off, if I can use a colloquial sort of response, right? And ultimately, it comes back to your opening question. The chair has a critical role. The chair's got to create an environment where all directors and executives feel confident. And I'm not talking about comfortable, because comfort, it's not the job of the board to make the chief executive feel comfortable. It's the job to hold him to account, to support him, to advise him or her. And so it's confident to raise issues, that they can do so with respect and manner, and competing views are welcomed. So it's useful in the induction for boards to talk about how we're going to handle these things before they come up live. It's useful to have in our code of conduct if we're going to that step of formality, to talk about how we're going to handle it. But ultimately, the chair needs to ensure that we play the situation, not the person. And if a director does start playing personally, that's jumped on immediately. And so this next comment may be, well, might get me in a little bit of trouble with some listeners, I don't know, and it's being recorded. So maturity and wisdom are key enablers. And that's not to say that I'm arguing for 75-year-old directors. So I'm not. I know a number of 30-year-old directors or 30-something directors that are quite mature, quite wise. Also know some 60 and 70-year-old ones that are probably a bit struggling. But if we think about a relationship, a correlation, the likelihood of directors being mature in their outlook and being able to draw on wisdom that is, previous experience and apply it to this situation is greater as we get older, so long as we don't get set in our ways. And so that ultimately comes down to the chair and the commitment, of the directors to feel comfortable, and that's about creating an environment. In fact, sometimes explicitly inviting competing views. A technique from 30 or 40 years ago that I learned when I was still in management in organisations. De Bono's 6 thinking hats. Okay, will somebody take the black hat? Or if we apply the Catholic Church, who's the devil's advocate on this? Will somebody please take a competing view? And then we know that they're not offering something up just to be pointy and sticky, but they're coming around the other side of the problem and looking at it to get that different perspective. Yeah,
that's a great technique I've used many times. Just in terms of other things around psychological safety, if you've got, established board where a lot of people know each other or have known each other for years, then you might get 1 or 2 new directors coming on board.
Yeah.
What can the board do, not just the chair, to build that psychological safety so that, because it ultimately comes from trust. When you have high trust, then you usually have high psychological safety.
Well, the incoming director, and look, I don't have a black and white answer to this, and I don't think anybody that does. But I had a situation yesterday, as recently as yesterday. So I was leading the second of 2 days on a purpose and strategy discovery, let's call it a workshop. So we had family business, multi-generational, the entire board was present, leadership team, 1 other staff member who is not on the executive but has a critical role, and a couple of shareholders. And one of the major shareholders not very well at the moment, and he's got a short fuse. And so there are some in the room that feel quite comfortable sitting silently because they feel uncomfortable. And I'm in the room, and there's about 11 in the room. 3 of them I'd never met before. So I had to earn their trust. Trust is not granted, trust is earned. Everybody comes into the room mutual. If there's 2 new directors, to your example, they've come into the room because the shareholders or whoever the appointments committee has decided that they're worthy of being in the room for whatever reason. First thing those people need to do is submit themselves to the board and begin on a journey of building relationships with a view to earning trust. And the induction program can be really helpful. Social events can be really helpful. So, for example, I encourage all commercial boards, the directors, to meet the night before the meeting if they're flying in or driving in, having a meal together, board alone time. What are the issues? And so you've got this degree of informality so that when you come into the boardroom and the camera's on, so to speak, you've got some relational connections there to start with. But look, if you've got a group of, 50 and 60-year-old men in pinstripe suits and white shirts and all of that, and then walks this younger person, of course they're going to feel intimidated. And of course they're going to want to earn their stripes. And of course the possibility of some contention is probably heightened.
Yeah. All right. No. I'm going to do a quick poll now. I'm interested to get people's views. By the way, you can add questions to the Q&A if you want as we go along, and we'll have a look at those. Just got one question, so I'll just give it a couple of minutes. So this is really looking at what you've experienced on boards that you've been on. So, in terms of different elements of, do you get experiences of people, one or more directors doing most of the talking? Do you have either one or more of the directors contributing very little? Is there a lot of the time where you've not had much debate and you're agreeing most of the time? Is there some times where there's regular unhealthy tension? And it's good that I put in this tension before I heard your word of tension, but of unhealthy tension between the board and the exec, or most of the above, or none of the above. So interesting just to see where things are falling out. So we're getting most of the above, one or more directors contributing very little, and one or more directors doing most of the talking. So there seem to be most of the answers. So we've had, most people contribute. It's quite interesting there. So no one's put none of the above. So no one's got a perfect board. So yeah, yes. So it's.
I was just going to say, while people are polling in there, Gerry, there's some interesting research, certainly polling and surveys that's done by McKinsey and some of the big boys every year. And the last one I saw, something like 55 or 60% of directors who responded to this particular poll, and it was something like 1,000 directors, primarily in the US, said there's one or more directors amongst their colleagues who they thought should leave the room, finish up, retire, resign, because they're ineffective. So, if half or 2/3 of directors in large boards feel like that, certainly I see it in smaller boards. One of the boards that I have been sitting on, there is a director that I know that several other directors have said to me, are you sure that Director A is adding value? And of course, my personal view is not going to be shared on this call, but it's quite commonplace, isn't it? Because we all want everybody to agree with us.
Yeah. So following off that last question, if you've got situations where the chair's not dealing with the conflict, so where they should be, and other directors are, if you've got a dominant director who's, speaking a lot or whatever, what can the other directors do in that situation, or what should they do in that situation?
Well, there needs to be some sort of acknowledgement there's a problem for a start, doesn't there? Mm-hmm. So if one or more directors are discerning, feeling, detecting, observing that there might be a problem, there's a chance that one or two other directors might be feeling uncomfortable or seeing something same or different. So that particular person who has made that observation should quietly just have a chat with one or two others just to see if they're an outlier or whether there's two or three. But I subscribe to the view that the person, and I'll own it for this conversation. So if I'm seeing something in somebody else or the chair that I'm uncomfortable with, I subscribe to the view that because I've detected it, I should go and speak privately to that person, right? And let them know, hey, I've seen this. What's going on? Is there some and not apportion blame to that person, but there's something going on. What am I missing here? Because it sort of seems to me we're not quite on the same wavelength. Okay. Now, oftentimes that conversation will be enough to deal with it. Sometimes it won't. And particularly if you've got a chair who's the problem and multiple directors, who are uncomfortable, then you need to move to that next level where there's this coalition of directors who go to the chair and say, hey, we need to have a chat. And that could be in board alone time, it could be privately. Another technique, especially if the chair does not respond, because most chairs, reputationally, ego, they want to think about the next appointment as well. But if the chair does not respond, then perhaps the issue can be brought up along the suggestion of doing a governance review, notice of not said board evaluation, because what we're talking about is behavioural. And to observe behaviours, we need to be in the room observing over a longitudinal sort of period. That a governance review, which then provides space for the external assessor to have a look at the decision-making processes and whether what we talk about in the meeting matches up with what we said we would and the quality of our decisions and are we following up. So all that good governance type of stuff. But my comment is this: rarely is conflict or domination down to one only person. It takes two to tango. So that person who is dominating will be doing so for a reason. They may or may not know it, but we're not charged as directors to be victims. We're charged as directors to be equals, and one of us is slightly more equal because our job is to convene, and therefore it's on us to have enough mental and social and psychological fortitude to raise these issues. If we can't, or if we feel grossly uncomfortable about doing so, I'd turn the mirror the other way and ask the question as to whether that person's actually suitable to continue as a director, which might be a bit contentious.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. So let's move from conflict to consensus building. So, so what we talked a bit, and some of the people have sort of called out on the call around where you get not a lot of debate going on. You talked about using Edward de Bono to bring out some, or if the group too quickly reaches consensus. What's your thoughts in boards where there's not enough tension in terms of the discussion, or actually some people are doing more of the heavy lifting and others are not contributing at all? And I've seen this on boards where you might have sports boards where you get elected people who, so they may not have the experience of some of the others around the room.
Yeah. So three little vignettes, and then not necessarily the answer, but a response. So the Fonterra board, so New Zealand's largest dairy firm, one of the world's big ones. 10, 15 years ago, upwards of a third of the directors didn't say much and struggled to read balance sheets and all of that. Much larger board than today, so it's been restructured since. But you had this notion of social loafer because as a cooperative, the shareholders, the farmers were interested in having eyes and ears in the room, not necessarily contribution to decision making, and so that's probably an indicator that board size is probably a factor. And the chair needs to draw somebody up, so people need to speak. Second one. I was on a call just recently with a chair setting up an advisory workshop that's going to be happening soon. I've been told that there's one director who's got a lot to say, and you might have to sort of sit him down a little bit. And so forewarned is forearmed. But I've also been told that same board does not debate much. And I was asked, is that a bad thing? And I said, well, not necessarily. Because if the situation is straightforward and the options are clear and apparent, even self-evident, then the useful response is to check in quickly and then quickly move to make a decision. But if there are competing perspectives or incomplete information that we really do need, which is more common, then we need to start talking early, even before the meeting. So to come to a meeting cold and all you've done is read the papers and not discussed anything beforehand, the poor old chair's got to warm the meeting up, get people talking. Whereas if we've polled things beforehand, we can at least enter the room ready to go. So having a roadmap, a series of steps as to what's required to get to a decision, and particularly if it's a major decision. I referred before about that capital project and the 6-month run. And if somebody is quiet when you work through that, a good chair will often take that person aside at a break. Hey, I noticed you've been a bit quiet. Is there something going on? You know, have you got nothing to say, or you know, can I draw on you? Good chairs will do that.
Mm. Yeah, that's good. And an area that you do want some, you know, where I don't think it'll be a quick pass through is strategy. So it's one of the critical things for boards. What are your recommendations to ensure boards equally contribute, so that the whole of the board is equally contributing, because you have obviously rapidly changing environments, and strategy is not a perfect science. So it does rely on, you know, diverse group of people, you know, exploring lots of different options.
Yeah. This group I was with yesterday, they wanted to use the phrase strategic plan. It's a bit of a hot button for me, because I say, well, are you talking about strategy or are you talking about planning? Because they're not the same. And so the first thing a board really needs to do is come to an understanding of what it's talking about. So what is strategy and what is it not? And that might, you know, that could be a 5-minute conversation, or it could be a discovery process. So that's first thing. But in terms of some of the principles, and you did talk about rapidly changing environment, and I think that opens up a temptation. I remember years ago a conversation with, I'm not going to name him, but one of the previous chairs of one of our companies in New Zealand, Xero, you know, what we would understand to be an online accounting business. Actually, it's a financial services provider, but that's okay. And I used to use them as an example when I was teaching for the Institute directors and elsewhere, because people who knew the founder knew that he's got a mind that's like this, and he's constantly changing. And so you'd ask the question, well, you know, how far ahead, what sort of strategic horizon should you take on? In the context with Rod Jury and Xero, people would think, because things are changing rapidly, that he'd strategize 90 days or 18 months at a stretch, you know. And the answer was 10 years. And they'd look at me in disbelief. But the point is this, that if we strategize based on what we know, in other words, short, then we've got to re-strategize every time something changes. Whereas if we strategize based on what we want to achieve, and then check in frequently based on the rate of change, then that completely lifts our eyes, keeps us focused on the goal, not on the activity. And our job as a board is to provide steerage and guidance, not compliance or anything like, well, you could do compliance anyway. So, you know, we talk about AI and ChatGPT and all these other things, and they're important for us to understand. But as directors, the best advice that I've received and offer, slow down, think long, act short. Strategy development is about creating a long-term plan, a roadmap to achieve a goal. Work out what the objective is, and the objective in a workshop or a working together is a coherent strategy. It's going to fit on 2 or 3 pages, independent of the size of the organisation. Use an external facilitator, and boards do need to be engaged in some way. If you are on a board and it's had not much prior involvement and it gets to sign off strategy, there's a quids-in chance it will sign off something it doesn't understand. Equally, if the board creates the strategy with minimal input from management, there's a good chance that management's not going to understand or not buy into how to implement it. So it's going to be a mess. So some sort of collegiality is important. In New Zealand, my observation is that most boards these days are comfortable to go to board away days and do strategy with management. from the perspective of talking about the wider context, some of the key principles, the heavy lifting's done by the management team, and they bring back drafts, and it's iterative. And I think that's a good approach. But a board who says that strategy is the domain of the chief executive is a board that I think is living in the 50s, and probably a company that is at risk of failure at some point in the near term.
Yeah. Okay. And linking to that, having to do really good strategy, I think diversity is important, as we've said. When you think about where that fits in the mix for a board, lots of boards talk about diversity.
Yep. And
they sometimes talk about visual diversity in terms of male, female, or color of your skin, or where you're from. What's your view in terms of an effective and diverse board, and what boards should be thinking about around diversity?
The big deep breath is because people will look at me and they'll see a bit of grey on the sides, and they might package me and bias up. But please hear me out on this. Strength and effectiveness in terms of the board's steerage and guidance, so governance, is a function of what the board does, not what it looks like. And the board is not Noah's Ark. We don't need one or two of everything. What we need is to work out what we need to make really good decisions, what we need to oversee well. And so the research shows that there are three things that matter if boards are going to have any influence on company performance, organisational performance. That is the capability of the directors. So have we got the sector knowledge, the technical expertise, the business acumen, those sort of things. And can we bring that to the table, and have we got the right mix of that? Second thing is activity. So the principles are around, strategic aims, ensuring leadership and culture, overseeing management and compliance, and of course providing an account to shareholders and the stewardship role. And that's called the strategic governance framework, and anybody that's interested, I can talk more about that. But if the objective is to achieve and sustain high organisational performance, what really matters is not demographic diversity. It's not diversity of thought. The maturity of the conversation has come through those. Neither of those are predictive of any sort of performance outcome. What matters is cognitive diversity. So this is about how we individually and collectively go about thinking about problems. So the way I think about a problem might be different from the way that Angela Lee or Anna Campbell or Graham Hill or Gerry on this call think about problems. And the role of the chair is to draw that out. So it's about multiple perspectives when we're ideating, and that's a creative process. It's about alignment around our goal when we're analysing those options and coming down to a decision. So boards have to be able to hold both, and that's where maturity and wisdom becomes important. I've seen many, many boards for which the directors all look similar and the performance is high. Many, many boards which they all look similar and they should be all sent out to pasture. Same with other demographic differences. So, the research, we want the research to say that it needs to look different. Hand on heart, if the goal is participation, diversity and different priorities really, really important. If the goal is high organisational performance, cognitive diversity and understanding the role of the board is more important. Now, that might be a bit contentious in some quarters, but you did ask the question.
No, it's good. And I'm interested, how do you, if you're recruiting for that or looking for that in a board, how do you test that or find that? I know I've got Lloyd on here, but with
easy. You go to the psychologists, and there are proven, reliable psychological tests that you can assess cognitive thinking and cognitive because diversity is really a function of multiple people. So you assess how I go about thinking about and processing problems for problem solving, and the next person, and the next person, and the next person. And then a really good recruiter will bring all those together, or psychological expert will bring all those together and form a complete set, right? So and that's well established in the psychology and sociology literature, and it's starting to become part of, and I know there's a recruiter in Auckland who does a good job, and I'm not going to name them on this call.
Cool. That's good. And so to finish up, we've got a question in the Q&A, and I'm thinking this comes from someone who's not on the board. So how do risk managers drive improved governance? Yeah. What advice would you give to such an individual who presents to an immature board where there's opportunity for upskilling or improvement? So sounds like a difficult task to me.
No, it's really, really easy. What I'm doing is I'm breathing in because I don't want to offend anybody. It's not the risk manager's job to improve governance. It's the board's job. Governance is the job of the board. Governance exists in the boardroom and nowhere else. Governance is the steering and guiding. Now, obviously, we've got all the rules beforehand. We've got a risk appetite, all of that. There's framework. But ultimately, it's like rugby or netball or any other sporting endeavour. We've got the rules of the game as played, and the score at the end. It's only the game that's played that is the game. And so governance, if we hold it's about steering and guiding, it's that. If we hold the more American view, which is a compliance orientation and risk, that's a subset, and a risk manager can certainly make sure that they're responding with appropriate risk reporting, but ultimately the role of governance lies in the boardroom, not with the risk manager. So there's not many things I'm strong on, but that is one of them.
Yeah, I suppose they're probably calling it how do they influence from within mature board. That's a pretty tough position to be in, I think. So.
Well, it's and the questions come through from somebody called anonymous attendee, and that's fine, right? The challenge here is that it's not that risk manager's job, and they should, if they've got a concern about how the board is making decisions, then I would suggest they need to go and have a chat with their manager or the chief executive and just sort of test that out and say, look, is there a chance I can have a chat with a risk and audit committee person? Because I've got some perspectives that I think respectfully may be worthy of consideration.
Yeah, so work with people outside. No, that's good. Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Peter. Much appreciated. So I've learnt a few things here in terms of tension versus conflict. So I'll remember that, and also the Jim Bolger's cup of tea. So if I ever on a board, then asking someone for a cup of tea, they know what I'm doing. So that's been fantastic. So really appreciate your time. I know you're a very busy man, and heading off somewhere overseas very shortly.
I've just come back from Scotland, and I think that my next trip's not until the 18th of July. I'm off to Sydney and Brisbane, but I live in a part of the country that is calm and quiet, and much of my work is in the cities and the commercial sector, and so I think I'm in Auckland 3 times next week on 3 separate trips. It's like others on this call, where busyness is not the goal. Sometimes it's the consequence, but it's about working with people and trying to make a difference. And I think if we have that mindset, then we can keep things in perspective. Then that's useful. Gerry, it's been an absolute delight to have a chat with you, and to the listeners, thanks very much. I hope it's been useful.
Yeah, thank you very much. And if you want to go on LinkedIn and connect with Peter, you'll find that he comes out with about 5 stories a day. I don't know where he gets the time to come out with everything, but there's some great stories and great links he'll come up with. If you need to connect with Govn365, you can connect with me or connect through the website. Happy to give you a demo. Thank you, Peter. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone on the call, and we'll talk later.
Thanks very much, Gerry. Okay, goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, yeah.